this. Thanks, Kimberly. Starting this coalition was something that I was really excited about doing. I know that a lot of folks here have a lot of thoughts on what we should be doing as a state with respect to decision making, with respect to guardianship. We all have different views, we all have different opinions, but the point is getting together as a whole state from different sectors to figure out what we have in common, but also the different specific niche needs of different fields and different geographic regions. So I want to let you know, as you heard just now, we are recording this session. We really wanted to be able to retain your ideas. We're going to be spending around the last third opening it up with sort of a listening session. And there are also a lot of people who wanted to come or initially RSVP'd and then couldn't make it and want to be able to see the recording if they can. That all being said, if that means that you don't want to have your camera on, completely understand. No pressure to have your camera on at all in any way. If there are things that you want to say or ideas you have and you rather that they aren't recorded, you can feel free to email me after. We'll also have a survey so that everyone has an opportunity to say what they want to say, and we'll be gathering all that information after. So definitely plenty of ways to get your ideas out if you don't want to be on the recording, but just wanted to let you know that that is happening. For now, we are asking that everyone stay muted. We do have this set as a Zoom meeting, which means that everyone can mute and unmute as they want. But the first portion of this kickoff event is going to be telling you a little bit about ourselves, why this coalition, and then turning it over to you. And hopefully we'll have plenty of time to hear you all. I wanted to let you know that signing up for this event today is not the same as signing up for further communication from us about what we'll be doing in the future and doing with some of the information we get from you. There will be a link that I will put in the chat, but it'll also be sent out to everyone after the meeting to be able to sign up for future communication. Amy, if you could go to the next slide for the agenda.
Uh-oh. Okay, here we go.
Great. So we're going to be starting off just talking a little bit about guardianship in New York. I'm sure that those of you who are here, you don't need a primer on it. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the landscape in New York right now, a little bit about ourselves, Project Guardianship, and the nonprofit model, and then talking about, in general, decision to support needs, this coalition, why is it here, what do we hope to do, and then we're going to turn it over to you. So first, we're going to kick it off with a poll, which I'm going to ask Kimberly to launch right now. Who is in the room? So if you are able, I do see that some of you are in the car or might be using your phone, but if you can answer the poll to the best of your ability, how you associate. You can choose to if you feel really split on what sector you're in. And this will give us a better idea in terms of also the different areas and voices that we need to recruit from too. Thanks. Great. All right. So we're going to give 10 more seconds. I see almost all of you have done the poll. Great. All right, Kimberly, can you show us the results? Thank you. Court examiner should be on the poll. I agree. Another question. I see that there's 10 people who did other. If you check the other box, if you could write in the chat from what group that you're from, that would be really helpful. I see someone mentioned CPA as well. Thank you. All right, so we have a lot of attorneys here, a lot of people who are guardian or from a guardianship organization, some representatives from aging services, and then less so from disability, community-based health and mental health, and government. Philanthropy, funder, great. CPA, all right, thanks. Please continue to funder. Put things in the chat if you feel we're missing. And again, this is a great way to know more about whose voices we need to be bringing into the conversation. All right, we can end the poll now. Great. So I am next going to turn it over to Kimberly George, our Executive Director and CEO of Project Guardianship, and she's going to start us off talking about guardianship in New York State.
Thank you, Dina. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start just by giving a very brief and very simplified intro to Article 81 guardianship in New York State so that we're all on the same page. As most of you know, guardianship is a legal tool that's created by state law, so it varies from state to state. In New York, there are 2 statutes. Project Guardianship practices under Article 81, which is for older adults and adults with disabilities and mental illness who have lost capacity. The other statute in New York State, which PG does not practice, is Article 17A, which is for children with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are aging out of parental control. This meeting and the GGAP Coalition is addressing Article 81 only. Article 81 is a mechanism by which a person or an entity, such as a hospital or adult protective services, can petition a court to have someone declared in need of a guardian due to a physical or cognitive limitation or diminishing capacity. After an investigation by a court evaluator and a hearing, if the court determines that the person cannot care for themselves or keep up with their home maintenance or other affairs and could come to harm or have already come to harm because of their limitations, the court appoints an individual or an agency to be the person's guardian. A guardian's powers are outlined by the court. According to New York State statute, the power should be specific to the person's need, but in practice, the powers are often wide-ranging. A guardian can be the guardian of person, making life decisions around healthcare and personal needs, or guardian of property, making financial decisions, or both guardian of person and property. New York's Article 81 statute is progressive comparatively in that it states that the power should be tailored to the needs of the person and that the guardianship must be the tool of last resort, meaning that all less restrictive alternatives have been exhausted. The guardianship process has many steps and often continues for the rest of the person's life. It is time-consuming and can be expensive for the petitioner and for the person under the guardianship because they often pay fees to their guardian. This becomes a problem when the person cannot afford the fees and has no family or friend willing to do it for free. New York does not have an official statewide public guardianship program. I'll come back to that in a second, but first let's look at who is petitioning for guardianship. Next slide. This data comes from the New York State Unified Court System. It's not a full count of guardianship petitions. The guardianship courts were asked to complete a data sheet starting back in 2018, but it was not collected for all cases. Still, this does give us a good picture of who is doing the petitions in New York State. You can see that family and friends represent the largest group of petitioners. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're the ones becoming the guardian. We'll get to that stat later about who becomes the guardian. But family and friends, if you add nursing homes and hospitals together, they match the number of petitions that are done by family and friends. And you'll also see that the Department of Social Services and Adult Protective Services also files a significant number of petitions. Next slide. Now back to New York State's guardianship system and who gets appointed as guardian. In New York, we have a patchwork of people and agencies who serve as guardian, family and friends, which are often referred to as lay guardians, can become the guardian for their loved ones. If there is no family or friend available to serve, the judge can appoint a private practicing guardian from what is called the Part 36 list. The list currently is mostly comprised of attorneys, but it is not a requirement to be an attorney to join the Part 36 list. So what are the judge's options when there's no family or friend and no money to pay a Part 36 guardian? It really depends on where the guardianship proceeding is taking place in the state. The statute requires that the Department of Social Services act as the guardian in these cases. However, DSS in many locations is not staffed or resourced for this role. Plus, there is an inherent conflict when DSS is in charge of investigating abuse and often is the petitioner. In New York State Department of Social Services, in New York City, DSS outsources the job to community guardian programs. They only become the guardian of people for whom APS was the petitioner and who live in the community, meaning outside of nursing homes and rehab centers. Hence the name community guardian. It's because the people live in the community. This can be a point of confusion because there are also a handful of nonprofit providers throughout the state who become guardian. They are separate and apart from the DSS funded community guardian programs in New York. So let's look at the numbers in terms of who's becoming guardian. You can see here that in the first slide, it's mostly family and friends who become guardian. But in the second slide, we aggregated the community guardian programs, Department of Social Services, and non-for-profit, so our scheme of last resort. And you can see that it becomes a significant portion of the appointees. And then you see Part 36 list is a valuable and needed source of guardianship in New York State. Next slide. And then, to further look into the point about the number of people that are using the scheme of last resort, this shows the percentage of people whose lack of assets limited their choice in guardian. And so you see the 42% said that they were limited. So I interpret this to mean that they couldn't go to the Part 36 list because there were no funds. And so they had to find one of the schemes of last resort that would be willing to take on the client or the person in need of the guardian. Next slide. So where does Project Guardianship fit into all of this? We are one of the handful of nonprofit agency guardianship providers that I mentioned. Our mission is to provide guardianship in a person-centered way and to transform the systems currently in place to make the way we care for people more equitable. Next slide. Nonprofits can offer a unique model like ours. They can offer a comprehensive, more person-centered approach that has the mission to maximize autonomy. At Project Guardianship, each client has a multidisciplinary team consisting of an attorney, a case manager, and a finance manager that's serving their case every single day. We specialize in keeping people in their homes and out of institutions, as well as moving people back home. Too often people get stuck in institutions after an illness or injury because there's no one to make the necessary arrangements to get them home. We also have special expertise in making end-of-life decisions in accordance with the law and in accordance with the person's wishes. We often put in place measures that increase our clients' comfort and prevent painful and excessive interventions. In addition, we serve as guardian to clients regardless of their ability to pay, and we have the capacity to provide services for the court's most complex cases. We are also willing to serve as co-guardian of personal needs with family or friends who might not be able to serve without extra support due to complicated situations. And lastly, we use our expertise and experience serving as guardian to conduct research and to organize and promote change to make the system better. Our goal is to reduce the overall need for guardianship and, when all else fails, ensure there's a good guardian to serve who has the resources to provide person-centered care that promotes autonomy. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dina to go into more into the research and advocacy part of our work and what brings us here today and the creation of this GGAP coalition.
Thank you, Kimberly. I also, first of all, I want to say welcome to those who joined before I welcomed everyone. Right when we started, I see a lot of names and faces from my past working in this world. So thank you for coming and for supporting us. I wanted to also mention before I get into this that the half hour about at the end, when I'm going to turn it over to all of you, what we're going to be asking is, what is the highest priority in meeting the care needs of your target population in your region? So if you want to start thinking about that and letting it percolate as I talk, please do. So I'm going to start by talking about this report that Project Guardianship Commission that came out in 2018. Maybe some of you know of it. When you get the slides, it will be linked here, but we'll also send a link separately in our follow-up email. It's called Incapacitated, Indigent, and Alone, Meeting Guardianship and Decision Support Needs in New York. So this was a report that was written by Pam Teester from Virginia Tech and Erica Wood, formerly of the ABA Commission on Law and Aging, and Kimberly George, as well as our legal director, John Holt. And the purpose of this study was to analyze the ways to increase and improve guardianship and decision support services, specifically for this population, people who have few or no resources and nobody to assist them. The findings and recommendations in this report were a really big step in organizing advocacy and change. And although the report focused on this specific group that I mentioned, the recommendations really, they relate to many different populations. So the recommendations for this report are kind of in 5 main buckets that you'll see up on this slide. You'll be able to easily see all of the recommendations in the report. The report is quite long, but there's a great executive summary and all the recommendations are listed at the end. I'm going to go over a couple of them right now that I think particularly relate to this work that we're doing. So first is looking at the need for guardianship and decision support services. So as you can imagine, in doing this research, it was found that there is a compelling and urgent unmet need for support services for individuals in the state of New York. And some of those related to data. We know that we need basic guardianship data to better inform us of the estimates of the unmet need. It's really hard to quantify right now. We have a lot of stories, but we don't have a ton of data. So we need this information to figure out what exactly is the need and to be able to form strategies to meet that need. Also supported services. It's recommending funding for home and community-based care, affordable housing for people who might be at risk of guardianship, especially congregate housing, where people can age safely in the community and easily access support services. And then the report recommended more guardians with varied skills, social work skills, nursing skills. I think Kimberly mentioned how a lot of guardians are attorneys, but they don't need to be attorneys. And different cases require different skill sets. Also more training for lesser restrictive options. The courts should be able to easily screen, and people in general should be able to easily screen for lesser restrictive options to avoid unnecessary appointments. Right now, there aren't really easy tools out there for that. And then also looking at more of an emphasis on restoration of rights, ensuring easy access to petitions for people to modify guardianships, to terminate guardianships. Those need to be not only more easily accessible, but more awareness that that's something that can be done. Guardianship doesn't need to be permanent and shouldn't be if it doesn't need to be. So then the second bucket here is who is serving as guardian. As Kimberly mentioned earlier, New York has this guardian of last resort scheme for those who have little assets, but each is really stretched thin. So what are the recommendations here? Funding for a diverse guardianship and decision-making support services pool that prioritizes living in the community. There's a little bit of a discussion about APS. I know in New York City, APS doesn't serve as guardian, but as many of you know, in other parts of the state, APS does get appointed as guardian. And it would be great if we could stop relying on APS to have that role so that it frees up APS to do all the other things that they have to be doing. We know that a lot is put on APS all the time. So it would be great if APS could take a step back and, a more full model of public guardianship was in place. And then there's the community guardian program, as Kimberly mentioned, that we have in New York. If there was more funding for those programs, we can look at lower client to staff ratios. There could be more of an ability to seek lesser restrictive options and maybe potentially terminate guardianships or modify guardianships. Those community guardian programs are so overloaded. There are so many clients that need them, and they should have more funding as well. And also, to get more guardians and good quality guardians to serve, there should be more incentive for serving in low fee and no fee cases. We hear from judges that part of a problem is they might appoint a guardian for someone, but then they don't have anyone to serve. And how can they appoint a guardian if they don't feel comfortable about who they're appointing? So then the third bucket is the court processes. A lot of these are being worked on right now, which is great. My computer is making sounds, sorry. So one of those things is developing uniform forms to help pro se litigants, help prevent errors, help people review forms faster, more ways to assist pro se litigants and lay guardians, things like reminders of filing deadlines, providing more instructions and samples, educating about things like getting a commission. A lot of people think that they get an order in judgment appointing them guardian and can think, great, now I'm guardian, but there's just so much more that needs to be done. And I know that we have a bunch of folks here who work on guardianship cases. I was a guardianship attorney for years, and those deadlines are crazy. There's so many of them. There's so many things that need to be done. Then there was also a national review of public guardianship programs, and some of the things that were found were that it's really important for there to be funding from a wide array of sources: state funds, county funds, grants, foundations, and then also client fees and estate recovery. But as we've talked about here, a lot of the big issue is that is lack of available people to serve when people can't afford fees, and there isn't really a state to recover from. So there needs to be lots of different sources for funding so it can be stable. Also, that organizations that have guardianship programs can also have repayee programs or adapt supported decision-making programs, that these guardianship programs can offer alternatives themselves, and that many around the country do. Also mentioned a million times already, prioritizing living at home is really important. People want to stay in their homes. And that the ideal staff to person ratio has seemed to be 1 to 20, which is hard to do when there is such a high level of need. And then finally, the report talked a bit about project guardianship and the nonprofit model of guardianship. Really often, I know Kimberly can attest, and I'm sure many of you can, it is the most resource intensive cases that end up being the ones that have very low fee or no fee. Therefore, there's really a need for these programs and alternative funding sources to be able to serve these people. That's really the only way that there's going to be, that we're going to be able to increase capacity to take on cases. These types of cases are really expensive to take on too. They involve a lot of people and a lot of thought. So I'm going to then talk about, can we go to the next slide, please? So we have this report. I just exhausted you with tons of the recommendations, but you really should go into the report and read them yourself. They help give a lot of really good ideas. A little bit about what's being done to implement these recommendations. What was great about this report is that it led to a lot of different projects. One big one being that the 2021 Elder Justice Innovation Grant from ACL, which is the Federal Administration for Community Living. The award was given to the New York State Unified Court System to examine and improve New York State Article 81 guardianship specifically. The recommendations in this report were a huge impetus for applying for and getting this grant, and Project Guardianship is a sub-grantee. And this project is doing some really great work right now, directly related to a lot of those recommendations. First of all, we have a group that is working on data. Like I said, lots of stories, not a lot of data. Makes it really hard to do planning and define some of the issues. So there's a group that's working on standardizing, modernizing, and improving the data systems used by the courts. So once that's put into place, it should hopefully show how cases unfold, identify patterns, needs, and outcomes with respect to the actual cases in the court. There's also a group that's currently working on uniform forms, which, again, to me as a former practitioner, very exciting. These forms are for each stage of the proceeding, from initiating a petition all the way to annual reports. And these forms are going to have plain language, instructions, translation into languages other than English, be easy to find on the website, be available in the courts. So that's a very exciting project that's happening right now. Project Guardianship in particular is involved as the chair of the group that's working on education and training. There is going to be, hopefully next year, launched a single website within the court website for all guardianship related info in plain language and multiple language. It will be a source for resources with a new emphasis on alternatives to guardianship and a new emphasis on modifications and restoration of rights. So people can know about all these things in an easy, centralized way. There's going to be guidance about what is guardianship, what isn't guardianship, and taking people in a simple manner through the court system. So we're working really hard on that right now. And then there's also a survey that was put together. Please keep your eyes out for it. It's specifically about using the court system, barriers in using the court system, barriers in helping people using the court system. It's not only going out to judges and court staff, but social services providers, guardians, professionals, and lay people who have used the system. It's all about what makes doing guardianship hard, what makes helping people do guardianship hard, and how can it be done better. So hopefully we'll get a lot of good information from that, and the courts can make some positive changes. Another thing is Project Guardianship's policy agenda. I'm going to take a sip of water. So Project Guardianship has legislative priorities that are also very related to some of the things that I've been talking about. The policy agenda will also be linked in the slides, and you'll be sent the link separately if you want to take a look. A couple of the things that are our legislative priorities are seeking steady funding for nonprofit guardianship. We actually have a small group advocating for a funding stream in the state budget right now. Maybe some of you who are working on that are here. If so, thank you. Increasing support for lay guardians, which we're working on, improving oversight, finding guardianship a designated home in state government. Guardianship overlaps with so many sectors. That's why a lot of you are here from so many different places. And it involves so much more than just the court and legal services. So with a home, policy priorities could be advanced, including promoting alternatives, normalizing termination and restoration of rights. And, you know, with that, our commitment at Project Guardianship to both promoting good guardianship, but also reducing reliance on guardianship, finally brings me to you. You know, we want to know what you're all doing. Probably as you're hearing these recommendations or these projects, you're thinking, oh, we're actually working on that right now, or I know someone who's working on that. Another reason to bring this group together. You know, if we can't get to those points today, please reach out to me, because as I've been meeting a lot of you and talking to you over the past couple of months, I find that a lot of people are doing great work that so many others don't know about, and some people are doing things that overlap. And wouldn't it be great if our projects weren't siloed and that we could be working across the state together? So a big hope is that this coalition will help us all find out what everyone else is doing. Next slide, please. So very briefly, again, I know that guardianship is not all about older adults, but this is the fastest growing segment of the population. So there are a couple of stats up there that it's projected that by 2030, 5.3 million people in New York will be over the age of 60, and that there is a large percentage of older adults who will need some form of long-term care. Also, as this population grows, the number of people living in poverty has also increased. And so we need to think about the fact that a large percentage will need some sort of long-term care, coupled with the fact that a lot of people don't have a lot of resources, can lead to really needing to examine the continuum of care. Our systems are overwhelmed. We all know this from real life. And so in order to avoid unnecessary guardianship, we need to focus both on the continuum of care and also alternative decision-making supports. These issues all impact our health in our state. And luckily, the New York Health Foundation recognized that, and they are helping fund the creation of GGAP, the Good Guardianship and Autonomy Preservation Coalition. So let's go to the next slide and talk about why are you here? And soon enough, you won't have to hear my voice for a little while. So why are we here? A lot of reasons. So first of all, Article 81. Article 81 mandates the exploration of lesser restrictive alternatives, right? We all know that, like Kimberly mentioned, it is a really great, well-written, progressive statute. But we know that even if all elements of incapacity are present, a guardian should only be appointed as a last resort, right? And if available resources, alternatives are there, there should not be a guardian. But we also know that a lot of people aren't sufficiently trained on alternatives. They don't know what to look for. There are things like knowing about what capacity level you need to sign a power of attorney, or the fact that if someone doesn't have capacity to manage their finances, they can still have a Social Security repayee. There's so much to learn about alternatives and so many specifics that in order to be able to have this statute work the way it needs to be, we also need to be doing our part too. And without knowing a lot about alternatives or being able to train people and the public, it leads to inappropriate, unnecessary petitions. It leads to inappropriate, unnecessary appointments. And it's not just about the availability of resources, but it's important to think about accessibility. So sure, there are places where alternatives to guardianship are needed and don't exist, right? I know that there are some people here that probably think, my clients are in situations where they either have guardianship or nothing, even if realistically other things should exist. There are also places that do have resources available, but you need a car, but you need internet, but you need to know about them in order to get them. And the extent to which these alternatives are an option depend on transportation, money, health insurance, whether you have a social network of someone who's going to help you get them. So those are all things that we need to be thinking about too. And then what I always refer to as the paradox of guardianship. We have a progressive statute. It talks a lot about self-determination, but realistically, when we're talking about guardianship, we're talking about the removal of rights, right? So we talk a lot about self-determination, but we need to recognize that it also is about the removal of rights and take care when we're talking about guardianship. And every time we're thinking about bringing a guardianship case or when we're acting as guardian, always remember that we're dealing with someone who has had rights removed. The orders are meant to be tailored, right? But petitions routinely request plenary authority. They ask for every power available and leads to people with guardians that, have more power, and then therefore they have less autonomy than they should. So I know I sound like a broken record about this, but there's this lack of focus on specificity, but also restoring rights when people no longer need guardians. There's also, as I know a lot of you know, a sort of magic wand use of guardianship. Guardianship cannot fix everything, right? Sometimes it's improperly used to deal with family disputes. It can be improperly used to deal with involuntary treatment issues, right? Involuntary psychiatric treatment, drug treatment. We know that's not even allowed. And it gets to a point where, we look at what's available in society and people panic because there's nothing there to help their loved ones and turn to guardianship when guardianship both shouldn't be used and can't be used that way. There are also procedural safeguards to protect the rights of people subject to guardianship proceedings, but one of the big ones that pops up as an issue often is that due to limited resources, judges often have to choose between appointing a court evaluator, which we know is very important in a guardianship case, or appointing counsel for the person who's subject to the guardianship. And it's such a shame. That shouldn't be the case. They are such different roles, right? We're talking about an attorney to help make sure that the voice of the person is heard in court. And then we're talking about someone who's supposed to investigate the petition. They're very different, but a lot of places don't have enough funding to have both. So even though, again, the statute has these lovely safeguards, if they can't be used, they can't be used. And then there's also that mismatch between the complex needs and then the expertise of available guardians. We know from that data that Kimberly showed that judges have specifically expressed concern about the difficulty finding suitable guardians for individuals with limited assets. I think it was something around 40% mentioned that they were having that trouble. So how are they supposed to comfortably appoint these guardians when there's no one well suited to take the case? So let's go to the next slide very briefly. These goals are big. So what are the goals at the end of the day? Reduce for this coalition, it's reducing reliance on guardianship, helping to fill gaps in the continuum of care. We're looking at the full range of physical, psychological, social, and economic support programs. All these services that's necessary to help maintain or restore people to be in their optimal environment. And thinking about that, if all those services are in place, how many people can we help prevent being in guardianship situations? Maybe a lot, maybe. I would think so. Increasing access to alternative decision-making support options. Yes, of course. And then if guardianship is needed, ensuring equitable access to good guardianship. If someone doesn't have money, that does not mean that they shouldn't be able to have someone who is going to pay close attention to them, listen to them, try to keep them in their homes, not put them in a nursing home just because it feels like the easier thing where people are going to give them what they need. So how are we going to reach these goals? And why all of you? Lofty goals. It's very important that there is a diversity in sectors and also geographic representation. Guardianship is an intersectional issue. So we need to figure out who's not heard in this arena, what geographic areas are underrepresented. So there's a couple of things on the slide. There's a lot of sectors on the slide, but there is a ... because there's a lot of sectors not on this slide as well. We know that guardianship is often used because it's addressing a problem related to another system: housing and eviction, benefits, healthcare, mental health. Think about how, as a housing issue, stable shelter could help avoid crises that could unnecessarily lead to guardianship. If there was more low-income housing, more units of supportive housing, less people would be needlessly institutionalized. And we know guardianship is usually not the best way to successfully address mental health issues. And the chief issues surrounding continuum of care and decision-making supports, those widely differ from sector to sector. So, when I'm thinking about these different sectors, for example, older adults in the LGBTQIA community are more likely to not have immediate family available to help with certain things, or maybe to be a POA agent. As an immigration issue, if someone doesn't have capacity to consent to immigration relief, this is a little bit esoteric. So, but you might need a POA agent or a guardian to get PRU-call status to access Medicaid. If those of you know what I'm talking about, you know how difficult that can be, but also how important it is. So there are so many specific things that relate to different groups of people that you are all working with. We need to make sure that we are trying to focus on as many of them as possible, because every single person is a different person, right? And also a part of the reason why it's important to have people from all different sectors is that educating on advanced directives, which I think is something probably most of you here agree is very important, it's something that needs to be done over and over at every stage of the continuum of care. So, you know, talking about living wills, healthcare proxies, powers of attorney, understanding the Family Healthcare Decisions Act, all those things can reduce unnecessary guardianship. I think from a webinar a while back, we learned that I think in Lewis County, they had a really wonderful program where people kept hammering the subject of powers of attorney over and over to clients of theirs. And then all of a sudden, the amount of powers of attorney skyrocketed, and they worked with, you know, local legal aid or something like that, and got all of these advanced directives done. And thinking about projects like that and how they can be scaled or adapted to our environments. Siloed projects, like I mentioned before, you all are doing really awesome things. And there's so many projects that we don't know about, that you don't know about, that we need to learn about from each other. Duplicating efforts never makes any sense. It's not better for the whole, but also learning about each other's successful programs and how to adapt them to our regions is something that we should be doing as well. And then geographic diversity, resources, infrastructure, demographics, all those factors really make all areas of our state unique. And we know, at least when we're talking about guardianship, it's a statewide statute, but the application differs depending on the county. For all those reasons and many other reasons, for those of you who work in New York City, you know that guardianship in Queens is different than guardianship in Staten Island. So just imagine the differences, you know, between here and, you know, Niagara County, right? Like we all do things very differently. Although hopefully with the things that are being done right now, there will be a little uniformity, which will help things. So we can't get that sort of information without all of you. We are working on a plan to define need, some sort of needs assessment or a survey to understand the priorities county to county. Again, the issue is that there is very little data. We have scattered anecdotes, and data and assessment are key to planning and securing funding. So we want to make sure that we do an assessment that treats the different areas of the state as unique, so that it will show us how to optimally deliver the innovative services required to meet the diverse needs around the state. And so we need your help, and we all stand to benefit. So what can you get out of it, right? This is just a start. We're here talking about the problem. We're here learning about the problems. In the future, we're seeing that you can get out of it education, information on topics of your choosing. You know, we don't want to be the drivers of it. You're hearing a lot from us today, but the idea is that what we do in the future is going to come from you. So learning about topics of your choosing, local networking and partnership building. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you all want to do, but we can't all do them with just our small organizations, and we need to work together. A forum to raise awareness of local and sector concerns. That's what we're starting with today. A voice to influence priority issues that we are going to address. So having your ideas steer our work. If we have campaigns to influence state policy and funding, as a group, it's much more easy. We can more easily get people to care if we have people from all over the state and representing all different fields and sectors saying we all care about X, Y, and Z. So how can you participate? And we're almost up to you. The next slide, Amy. We have this survey of priorities. It's not a long survey or anything. It's basically 2 open-ended questions. It's basically, what are your priorities and what discrete projects would you like to see? Are you interested in legal medical partnerships for advanced directives, or expanding supported decision-making, or just doing more work related to access to alternatives? You tell us. So the survey is in the link. I will also provide it in the chat. Another way is that you can volunteer as a geographic leader to help us both shape this assessment that we are going to be doing and shaping the survey that's going to be going out, but also not only helping generate buy-in for the project, but help us figure out who is not here, who do we need to be talking to. You know, I am so glad that there are so many of you here today, but I'm sure there's a lot of people not here who could be here. I saw in the chat, it says the survey is not working. I will check on it when I turn it over to you, and I'll make sure you have the right link. And then just looking out for upcoming events, webinars, smaller discussion groups. We'll be looking for people who want to share, people who want to listen, people who want to have small engaging discussions. So look out for how to participate in those. I am going to check on the link now because I am going to turn it over to you. Amy, the next slide, please. So we now have plenty of time. It is 11:20 now. We can keep this open until noon. We want to know, what is the highest priority in meeting the care needs of your target population in your region? So before we get started and opening it up for you, I want to try to limit it to 1 to 2 minutes so we can hear as many people as possible. And let's remember that this is, or I'm hoping that this can be, a safe and non-critical space. I know people have different priorities and perspectives and opinions. That's why we're here. But this isn't a time to critique the work that each other is doing, but it's a time to give your priorities to looking forward. So let's remember that and still be kind. Kimberly just put the document in the chat. If that's not working for you, please let me know. You will see in that link that Kimberly just shared in the chat, this is where you will both sign up to receive future communication. Let us know if you're interested in doing anything related to geographic leadership with us, and the survey about what you'd like us to be doing. So I would love it, since there are a lot of people here. Let me close out for a second and see. Yeah, we have 80 people in here right now. Amazing. So does everybody know how to use the raise hand option? If you can use either the raise hand option or the chat option to say if you would like to speak about your priority issue, and we will try to get to everyone who wants to speak. Who wants to get us started? Again, the question is, what's the highest priority in meeting the care needs of your target population in your region? You can treat the question as broad as you would like. All right, Dr. Gamard, do you want to get started? You can unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline. I'm a psychologist in Manhattan. I work with individuals and families that have somebody with very complex psychiatric presentations. And my clients are typically very wealthy. And I think the biggest problem that I have right now is the lack of guardianship accountability, the sort of there's the limited checks and balances with what the guardian is doing, and the lack of training and sort of nuance that it takes to be a guardian. You know, I think that there needs to be a lot more investment into teaching people how to be guardians and realizing that it's not a one-size-fits-all model. And the other piece is that some of these cases are so complex, and the reimbursement as a guardian is so limited that the effort versus outcome, it's not really there for a lot of people. So that's where I am right now.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. We definitely hear that. Who would like to go next? I know that we have a chatty bunch here because I've talked to many of you in the past. You don't need to turn your camera on, and you could also go in the chat. I can start by reading what Adina Siegel wrote in the chat. She says they had got an ACL grant and are rolling out a bunch of new programs. Adina is from Caring Kind, which is sort of a spinoff from the Alzheimer's Association in New York City. And one of the developments is care planning for people with dementia living alone. That is great, Adina. I love to hear that and would love to learn more about that. Brad, are you unmuted because you want to talk?
You know, Dina, I was going to say I didn't want to be the one to yak, but yes, that's why I was unmuting and putting on my screen so I could talk briefly. Thank you so much for bringing us all together and so we can all talk about this stuff. For those of you who don't know, I'm up in Buffalo, New York with the Center for Elder Law and Justice. We serve as guardian for about 100 people, most of whom have Alzheimer's disease, dementia, often when they've hit rock bottom and don't have any other people to serve as guardian because there was no power of attorney, there was no healthcare proxy, and these people don't have the capacity to enter into those documents anymore. I guess I'll do a two-pronged issue of things that we certainly need to see support for. One of which would be, you know, agencies like ourselves who provide these guardianship services, obviously not to bang the money drum, but that is unfortunately a big part of this. In my years doing this work, we've seen that those folks who do have funds to hire an attorney ahead of time get estate planning done, get a power of attorney, get healthcare proxies. The folks who are poorer or of lesser means don't have the ability. So we really just need more funds to A, support guardians, and B, support those professionals, attorneys as part of the guardianship process. You know, it's really tough for an older adult who did not ask for this guardianship proceeding to have to pay petitioner, court evaluator, attorney's fees for their court-appointed attorney, and ongoing guardian fees. And sometimes those funds aren't even there. So of course, finding a way to support the guardianship system as it is, because if I'm on my soapbox, we're only going to have more and more older adults with dementia who are going to end up needing these services. Secondarily, I just want to highlight one way we are trying to provide support and where we're seeing more assistance is the Family Guardian Support Project, which is a program that our office started up last year with funding from the Ralph Wilson Foundation. I'll put the link in the chat once I'm done chatting verbally here. But it's a way to support family guardians. So we've often seen maybe an uncle or an aunt or a son or a daughter gets appointed as a niece or nephew oftentimes, gets appointed as guardian, but they have no idea what the heck they're doing. You know, it's hard for all of us to be fiduciaries and know the law and know Medicaid. For it to be a lay person who's just doing it on the weekends when they're living their own lives. You know, the guardianship training videos that are provided by the Guardian Assistance Network, which are helpful, you know, it's not in-depth enough to be able to really know what you need to do as guardian. So a place that we've seen a need for support and where we're trying to fill that gap is this program where we're meeting with family guardians, helping them to get their commissions, their oath and designation, explaining to them Medicaid, walking them through the initial and annual reports. So that's another area where we see a great need because as we saw in your slides, a lot of family members are the ones who get appointed as guardians. And so we want to try to help them to be successful off the bat, as opposed to having the court examiner 2 years later having to file a motion to remove them because they just didn't know how to do the form.
I'd like to say something, and I did put something on the chat. I serve on the surrogate decision-making committee. I'm also a guardian. And what I have, and a referee, and what I've discovered within the courts, there are some appointed guardians who will always get the cases where there is some fee attached. And others are always, you're basically volunteering. And it's not easy. Sometimes because I have had to find if they're next of kin, I live up in the Dutchess area. I've had to travel to people's houses Go there in the evening to try and catch people, go and meet with people, have interviews, and I've not collected a fee. And yet I know that there are others who they're constantly collecting fees, that even the ridiculous survey at the end of the year or where they ask if you have collected more than a certain amount. I don't even think I have collected 100 of what that amount is in my services. So I think part of this discussion has to be, how do we have equity in when we provide these services, because the services are necessary. And I am not in it for the money. I have been a nursing home ombudsman where I'm not paid. There is a need for the service. And as your indicators point out, we have an aging population, and not everyone who is aging has the wealth or the means to really, provide for themselves or put the things in place that they need to put in place. So how do we address the courts that what the judges are doing is not appropriate? It is not right. You cannot have this old boys or old girls crony system.
I hear you, June, and I'm wondering, in working with the courts, if maybe there's a way to see that imbalance maybe in data of who's getting which types of cases, because I hear what you're saying. If there's just some individuals who are always getting the cases that give fees and some that aren't, eventually the people who aren't going to get the fees might just tire out and not want to do it anymore. And it sounds like you work really hard and are a good one. And it would be such a shame that because it's, you feel like you're not getting the mix of cases that everyone should be getting, that you're feeling the way that you do. So it would be interesting to maybe see if there's any sort of data on who's getting those cases. So thank you so much. I see that we have a couple of people who have raised their hands. So Annabelle, I'm going to ask you to unmute and start with you.
Hi, thanks. This is a great forum, and I'm glad I was able to participate. So a couple of different things. First, I'm going to have to agree 100% with June, that I also feel like I'm somebody who gets contacted by the judges to take these pro bono cases. And, to some extent, fine. I don't mind giving back. That's what life is all about. But I also need to make a living. So that makes it difficult. And I want to agree with the previous speaker, Bradley, I think his name was, who was talking about how the system is designed to impoverish people who happen to be caught up in the guardian system. So I have one ward in particular who, inherited something from her parents. She's collecting Social Security. She's at home, right? And there could be a way for her to sort of make do and live her life with her resources, even in a modest way. But once she pays off all of these huge debts that have been incurred through this guardianship process, she's going to be destitute. I don't know how she's going to stay in her house or what's going to happen next. And I almost want to jump ship before all that happens. So the other thing that I've noticed is she is less willing to talk to me or visit with me because she understands that, my time gets put on an affirmation of legal services. I've been her guardian for 3 years. I've never seen a penny. And I don't bill for, could somebody mute themselves, please? And I don't bill for every little bit of time that I spend on her case either, just because I'm not a very good business person. So, and the other thing I just wanted to say, I figured I'd throw it out there in case somebody's willing to give me a hand. One of my 100% pro bono guardianship matters, I have a guy who has suddenly zero quality of life, and I'd like to file a motion to gain authority to withhold life-sustaining measures from him. And I know it's an uphill battle. I may not win, but I feel as a human being, I want to at least make the motion. So if anybody has a form that they'd be willing to share with me, because again, it's a completely pro bono matter. I'm a solo practitioner, and which makes it even harder. I think if you're in a big firm and associates can do some of this work, it's a little bit easier on people. But for a solo practitioner to take on these pro bono guardianship matters is a real labor of love, so to speak. So anyway, I know I said a lot, but thank you.
And if anyone has any information that will help Annabelle with her motion or any templates or anything, Annabelle, I have your email address from your signing up. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, I mean, you can put your email address in the chat if you would like, but if you want to reach out to me, I can connect you to anyone who is available to help. So if someone has anything for Annabelle, you can reach out to me and I will connect you. Thank you. And thanks for your opinions and thoughts as well. All right, next up is Heather. Heather, feel free to unmute.
Hi, everybody. I'm Heather West. I'm the Director of Civil Legal Services here at the Rural Law Center of New York. I have one concern and one offer, so to say. My concern is we represent 44 rural counties in New York, and we have no pro bono attorneys for these guardianships. We don't appear in court because simply we physically can't. I cannot drive all over New York to go into courts for these matters. What we do is we tend to advise the clients of what's needed, what information they need to gather. At a certain point, the clients get scared. It is incredibly expensive, very time consuming. So I think just, the availability of pro bono attorney to walk into court with them would be of great service to our clients. As for the offer, here at the Rural Law Center, we offer free legal services to any low-income New Yorker in the 44 rural counties, and that does include powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, last will and testaments. So if you are searching for somebody to help you, like I said, the Rural Law Center, feel free to send them our way. They are free services. And our guidelines are pretty generous. I think we're like 250% above the poverty line. So I have in my local area, I'm up in Clinton County, I'm near Canada. So Dean, if you want beautiful leaves, come up here. But we have been doing for like say offices of the aging or senior centers, we're happy to do Zoom presentations on these subjects to try and get that information out there. But that is my offer. Anybody feel free to take it up. Dina, you are always welcome to come up to good old Plattsburgh and take a look at our leads. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, I know some people who went to SUNY Plattsburgh. It's beautiful up there. So Heather, since you offer services for all 44 rural counties, are the services done via video, faxing? How does that go?
Typically with phone calls, but we also do Zoom meetings. I basically get all of the information. We set up a phone call. We'll send out information sheets for the client to fill out so we have some background. But whatever is best for the client. And in particular, when we're talking about rural areas, and this is a whole other topic about the internet, it's typically phone calls. And a lot of my clientele are elderly, so the computer may not be the best way for them. But we have set up a system, and thanks to COVID, we got really good at it. And sending final documents with very specific instructions. And our clients, we have a lot of repeat clients coming back to us just to double check and make sure. And we're happy to do that. I mean, we're just a little not-for-profit, but we've seen a great big uptake in these sorts of documents with the powers of attorney in particular, I think, and healthcare proxies. So, great. And like I said, we're happy to discuss it.
Wonderful, thank you. And see, I didn't know that. That's why a forum like this is great. And, it's giving me ideas for smaller presentations we can do in the future about maybe some underused services that apply to a lot of people. So thanks a lot.
We're not well known, but we're here.
You're there. Yeah. And in a beautiful leafy place. So I'm going to turn it over to Lynn next. Lynn, you can feel free to unmute.
So I see, I work with people who are mainly looking to get more hours of home care approved by their MLTC plans. And in the course of doing that, we are often identify that they don't have a lot in the way of family support, and they have conditions that predict that they will have waning capacity. And there doesn't really seem to be any toolkit or set of arrangements people can make through any kind of advanced directive to extend the time that they can age safely in place as their capacity wanes to do things other than get more home care. But the home care aid is not going to pay their bills, is not going to, keep basic, we call them instrumental activities of daily living, is not paid for by Medicaid. And when people are unable to do that, things fall apart pretty fast. Or they do have family members, and those family members have, skills deficits to be able to take on those kind of responsibilities for someone else, either to execute a POA. There's not a background check on a POA for the most part. So we don't see people being screened out for characteristics like law enforcement system involvement, unlike true guardianship. So that's less of a burden, but there's definitely a functional literacy burden, which has a socioeconomic and racial pattern to it.
Thank you, Lynn. That was great. That was a very good comment on a very big issue, and very well put. Thank you. Next up, we have Erica. Erica, you can unmute.
Hello, everyone. I'm actually going to kind of mirror Heather's pitch, but from the opposite end of New York State, because I'm with Nassau Suffolk Law Services, and we're actually a really big not-for-profit on Long Island. So if you want beaches, which are very pretty in the winter too, don't let the cold weather fool you, you can come visit me. Or maybe Heather and I can meet in the middle. I don't know if anybody's going to the partnership conference in Albany next month or next week, but I'll be there. So if anybody wants, I'll buy them a drink at the bar or a soda, as the case may be.
My family is historically a winter Montauk family, so I understand for those of you who know what that means.
Absolutely. I'm a born and bred downstater. So to me, anything north of Yonkers is way upstate. So Heather, you're like, yeah, I know, right? Anyway, we do the same types of thing, I think, that Heather does, except in 2 districts with very high density populations, which you guys in the city are saying, high density, my butt, but it's high density for us. And I think part of what I would like to see is collaboration and networking, because we offer, like Heather said, we offer free legal services to people, and not all of our units, we're lucky. Some of our units are low income, but some of our units are actually just, the qualifiers are different. Like I'm the staff attorney for the adult care facility unit. There's no income requirements. You just have to be in an adult care facility. If you're a veteran, we have a veterans unit. You don't have to have low income. And then there are the other units that do have low income, but the bottom line is still the same, which is we also offer all sorts of advanced directive protocols that we're happy to help with. And in terms of what Lynn mentioned is interesting, the screening, I can tell you that you're right. I agree that we need a more formal type of screening. But when I'm doing a power of attorney for somebody, if I smell a rat, I have and Heather's nodding because she knows what I'm going to say. I will sometimes decline to do it. If it doesn't pass my smell test, it's like an extra layer of protection, which is all the more reason to have, even if it's not an attorney, somebody who's a third party subjective individual assisting with these kinds of things. What is the highest priority in meeting the care needs of my target population?
Oh, no, it's just, I'm just repeating the question. So
Oh,
people can
okay.
still
I'm like,
see
wait
it.
a minute.
You're good.
Yeah, but I really feel like collaboration and networking and communication to try to, if we can, get all of these advanced directives kind of down to a nice pipeline type distribution. And that may circumvent the need for some of these more extreme guardianship instances, unless it's truly needed, in which case then that's like a whole second part of the collaboration thing. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Erica. And I see that NSLS has a fan in the chat. We still have about 13 minutes left now. If anybody else wants to make a comment about meeting the needs of your population.
Dina, I just wanted to ask, like, what comes next? I mean, I know this is your big kickoff event, so what can we do for you? Are there other things coming up that we should keep our ear to the ground on, listservs, all that jazz?
Yeah, so we are going to be sending around, I know that the link was in the chat. I will put the link in the chat again. Signing up for this kickoff informational event today is not the same as signing up for future communications. We wanted people to feel like they had choice in that respect. So there is a link on that. You can sign up for future communications. You can let us know if you have any interest in doing any regional leadership work. Right now, I don't intend on that regional leadership work being very labor intensive or anything like that. Just learning more about what's happening in your area and helping come up with some sort of needs assessment survey that we want to make sure is really geographically inclusive. We are hoping to have both webinars and regional discussion groups or subject matter related discussion groups that will be led by your interest. And a lot of what we do next really depends on what we hear from you and what we hear from you in these surveys and after this event. And, you know, learning there in smaller conversations and written communications where everyone's priorities stand. And then through those conversations, we can learn about actual tangible partnerships that people want to make with each other too, right? Because realistically, we want to be looking at programs for alternatives to guardianship or how we can work together to advocate for things that people in this group want. How can we, you know, write a letter to legislature, bring some issues to the court? There's many options there, but step one, fill out this survey, sign up for future communications. I and people at Project Guardianship will spend some time looking through and compiling everything. And the more people who respond, the more we'll know what you all care about and want to do. I see Olga has her hand raised. Hey, Olga, you can unmute.
Thank you, Dina. Hello, everybody. What a pleasure to hear all the good ideas and points that have been made. Thank you so much. So let me introduce myself. I am the director of the Guardian Assistance Network, and that is the court program, Office of Court Administration program, that trains and gives individual assistance to lay guardians explicitly. So I should add that we are 2 staff members in the network and we serve the whole state of 62 counties. So we're glad always to have Brad Lloyd-Leaguer's Western program take part of the load there in helping lay guardians. I wanted to make, after you've gone to the general, let me go back to the very specific for a second. This point may not sound that important, but one thing I love to hear the efforts that are being made to increase the use of advanced directives, health proxies, powers, and the rest. We need to see how those documents are defended, are given the validity and the effectiveness that they have. I get calls not only from people who are now guardians and seem to have had proper advance directives, but also from people who call us and say, they told me I should get guardianship. I talk to them and I find out that they have documents. There may be documents that are invalid. There may be documents that are granting agency to parties where that should not be the party. That's true. But the valid documents that are out there that somehow partly the private bar have seen as not as good as guardianship, you might as well get guardianship to make sure that you can do everything. And I think that notion collectively has made advanced directives less effective. It's not only signing them, it's defending them. And I almost need, like, you have to have attorneys willing to pick up the phone, and that may not be worth a fee or the time, but somebody has to pick up the phone and say to the bank, say to the hospital, say to the nursing home, to whoever it is, hello? This document is valid. You need to respect it or else. And then the problem with that is, what are you going to do? Go to court to assert the validity of the document? That creates a whole new level of practice. And like I said, probably not feasible. So I think generally people are advised, just go for guardianship. I see that a lot. I think that's a point that we need to address. And it's wonderful to know that the directives are being done, but they have to be followed up, unfortunately. That was it from my practice. Talk about anecdotal, Dina, that's always me.
All the information that we have is mostly anecdotal, Olga. I love listening to you talk, and the more anecdotal information we have, the better.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you, Olga. So we have a few minutes left. We have time for one or two more people.
Dina,
I would like to, yeah.
Sorry, I would just like, in follow up to Bradley's question in your response about what's next and next steps for this group. I just want to ask folks and encourage you, if there are particular topics that you want to learn more about or that you could teach the group about, the easiest thing we can do is, have these meetings where we have a presentation and we discuss issues. So that's sort of the lowest hanging fruit. So if people have ideas about wanting to cover something in particular, we're happy to organize that. So in your survey responses, please let us know what areas you're interested in learning more about.
Thank you, Kimberly. Is there any? Yes, go ahead.
Can I get Lynn Decker's phone number?
Lynn Decker, are you outside of this meeting willing to share your phone number?
Well, I'll give you the number for ICANN's helpline, because I would not work with somebody who wasn't in the 5 boroughs of New York City.
I am.
And I don't, okay. And I don't want, but I don't want all the business, right? I'm a whole network, not just one person.
I understand. How do I get in touch with you or somebody that can help with the home care hours?
Great. So I put her in for, I put our website in the chat, but let me our helpline number is it is 844-614-8800. That's from memory. I could have it wrong. You should look at our website, which is icannNYS.org.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Lynn, I put the phone number you said in the chat, but with the caveat that it's most likely the correct phone number.
Yes. And as Erica mentions, NASA Suffolk Law Services has an ICANN unit. A number of legal services organizations are make up our statewide network. So there may be other people on this call who have an affiliation with ICANN.
Great. And I just looked it up on the website and confirmed that your number was correct.
Okay, thank you. It's so nice to know my memory still works.
Yeah, great. All right, we have time for probably one more person. Does anyone else want to say anything before we wrap up? All right, well then, in that case, I want to thank you all. I'm just putting up our next steps. I want to thank you all. If you have any questions, if you have any ideas, if you want more information about anything that we said today, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. My email address is up there. It's dschwartz@newyorkcourts.gov. It's also all over the materials we sent out about this kickoff informational event today. We will be making sure that we sent out that link for you to fill out. There are 2 main guided questions in that survey, but if you want to answer, you know, in a way that goes outside the confines of those questions, really the more information, the better. We really, really want to hear from you. And like Kimberly said, if there's anything that you really want to learn about or something that you've been doing that you would like to present about, teach about, let us know. We are open to putting together all sorts of learning sessions and discussion sessions. So I'm going to stop the share now so that we can all say goodbye. And thank you so much for coming. This was, it was so great to have all of you here. You know, you put these things together and you hope that there is the interest that you think there is. And it was really heartening to have you all be here and attend. And we will be in touch and we'll be talking in the future. I hope that a lot of you sign up to just get future communications, and hopefully we'll do some really good things together. And again, if anyone has any resources for Annabelle for her motion, let me know. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dina. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Great job, Dina and everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoy your leaves in the upper part of the state.
They're beautiful.
I believe you.